I was watching a band on YouTube and I noticed that they had these light towers sitting behind them. And they were really nice and they changed colors and they added a lot of atmosphere without being too distracting. Looking at you, Freedom Sticks. Man, those things can be real bad. After a lot of research and digging and typing the wrong thing in Google, I eventually came up that they're called Truss Totems. Now, a lot of bands and DJs alike will put them on the sides next to them, and then what they do is they put a moving light, or what they call a mover, appropriately named, light that goes around and it sits on top. But I just wanted the light tower. So then when I did some more research, I looked online to see how much that would cost, and it turns out they're pretty expensive. Far too rich for my blood at this stage, and if you've seen my other YouTube videos, you know I like to DIY things myself. The first thing I did was I hit up Amazon and I looked up some cheap par lights. The reason I went with these cheap ones is because nobody's going to care what they look like. Now this older style, what it has is this LED only does one color, so in this case it might be blue, and this one will be green, and this will be red, and then they mix to make the colors, but nobody's going to see that inside of a light tower, so cheap. If you watch my other DIY videos, you'll remember that I worked at a sign shop, and it's much the same technique that I used with the tip jar and the ego riser, and this cute little light that I made for the band as a gift. And all it is there's LEDs below, and they light up through the plastic, and this is actually just a piece of vinyl on there, and that captures the light and makes it glow. So I needed something cheap because plastic and plexiglass like that is extremely expensive. So the cheapest way I could find to do it was to use a piece of plastic called Coraplast. Now you can find this at any sort of Home Depot store or Lowe's. And what it is, it's the same kind of material that they make all those yard signs out of for garage sales or house for sale or car for sale or any of those. It's just a corrugated plastic. Now I needed it to hold a shape, and to get it to be able to fold nicely and in the same way, you need to score one of those sections on the back side. Now be very careful, it's really easy to cut through, but don't worry, you can throw clear tape on there. It will be noticeable up close, but from a distance you won't even see. But the first thing I did was I set it up as a triangle, and I put it around my par light as a test, and the test looked like this. Now I thought that was quite successful, and in that attempt all I did was I put a piece of cardboard on the top so the light wouldn't escape. But I wanted the design to look more like the truss towers that I really liked, so I needed to square off the corners. Now, unfortunately, I could only go far enough to do 3 sides, but all I did was I needed something to hold that shape. Then I built this little box out of pieces of random beat-up plywood that I had laying around from other projects. You can see it doesn't look very nice up close, but from a distance and on the stage, you're never going to see it. And honestly, I really thought I would redo this at some point, but here we are. Now with that box on the bottom, it hides the light source and it looks a little bit more professional. Now all I needed was the top. So what I did with the top, you guessed it, leftover plywood. I just painted it black. On this one, what I ended up doing was I just made a square that was a little bit larger, and then I used some rubber stripping and I put it in there to create a channel for the Coraplast to sit in so the Coraplast would hold its shape on the top also. The final piece I needed was something to block the light from escaping out the back. Now I could have done something simple like cardboard with aluminum foil to cause some reflections in there, which would have made it much brighter, but I didn't want to keep carrying that around everywhere. So what I did was I used a cheap white sheet off of Amazon, and then I bought little clips so I can clip it to the inside of the Coraplast. I showed the rest of the band and they really liked them, and my cost to build one of these was $70, which is quite a bit different from the $500, $600, or even $700 that the actual truss would cost. So I went ahead and I built 2, and then we've been using them on the stage. Now you can see from these different shots from different shows that during the daylight you can't see them that well, but they really start to pop when they're inside and it gets dark, or when the show starts, because almost every show is a little bit darker. The reason I went with cheap Amazon par lights was because now it gives me options, because I can hook it up to my DMX unit and I can run it with the rest of my stage lights, creating even more atmosphere and more fun events for the show. The one downside to this build is that these units are incredibly light and really susceptible to wind, so you can really only use them indoors. I did build a version of this where I used PVC tubing for the framing instead of a truss, and it worked. And when I threw over just that cheap sheet that I had before, I realized it was wrinkly and it looked like a mess, and then I knew that for sure I'd have to buy a polyester stock and build that. So the cost was almost double per. While it's something I might do in the future, right now we just don't need it. I get a lot of compliments on these during gigs and when I'm on break, and people are always really excited about them. They think they look really nice, and then when I show them how lo-fi they're actually built, it's kind of funny, but they have no idea because It's a lot of those paintings and stuff where they say your viewing distance should be 6 foot. You absolutely cannot tell from a distance that this is a DIY project. Thanks for joining me on another one of my DIY adventures. I'm always looking for ways to up our game and our stage presence, and these little projects are fun for me to do. Please hit me in the comments if you have any projects that you did for your band that you think went over really well, or something that I should check out. Thanks for joining me, and we'll check you out next time. Check you out next time?